Canada, known for its vast landscapes and welcoming demeanor, is currently embroiled in a heated debate over the economic policies of its Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. The recent tax hikes introduced by Trudeau's government have stirred significant controversy and discussion across the nation. These increases, part of a broader fiscal strategy, aim to address climate change, fund social programs, and manage the national debt. However, the implications of these policies have raised concerns about their long-term effects on the Canadian economy and the financial well-being of its citizens.
Trudeau government in Ottawa, on the payroll taxes, the government's going to be eating away from more of your paycheck in 2024. You can expect to pay up to an extra $347 through payroll taxes.
One of the most significant and controversial measures introduced by the Prime Minister's government is the substantial hike in the carbon tax. Initially implemented as a cornerstone of Canada's commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement, the carbon tax aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by making pollution more costly and thereby incentivizing cleaner alternatives. The tax, which began at $20 per ton of CO2 emissions in 2019, is set to rise incrementally each year, reaching $170 per ton by 2030. This increase represents a significant financial burden for Canadian households and businesses, leading to higher costs for fuel, heating, and electricity.
It now sits at just under $1.63 a liter, and this comes as the consumer carbon levy climbed $15 per ton. The charge is added to the price of more than 20 different fuel sources, which provide and produce greenhouse gas emissions. So the price on pollution now stands at $80 a ton. However, the increase comes with a boost to the rebate that the government.
The whole rationale behind this carbon tax is multifaceted. On the environmental front, the government argues that making carbon emissions more expensive will encourage individuals and businesses to adopt cleaner technologies and reduce their carbon footprints. This policy is designed to support Canada's goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. From an economic perspective, the revenue generated from the carbon tax is intended to fund green infrastructure projects and provide rebates to Canadian households. According to the government, the average family of four in Ontario, for example, will receive rebates that exceed the amount paid in carbon taxes by 2030.
Government issues to help mitigate the costs. Ottawa plans to increase the levy each year until 2030. The program was established in 2019 to combat climate change.
However, critics argue that the carbon tax disproportionately affects lower-income households who spend a larger share of their income on energy and transportation. They contend that wealthier Canadians can more easily absorb the increased cost or invest in energy-efficient technologies. Those with lower incomes are left with fewer options and greater financial strain. In addition to the carbon tax, the Trudeau government has also introduced changes to employment insurance contributions and federal income tax brackets. Starting in 2024, employees will see an increase in their EI contributions, paying $1,049 annually, while employers will contribute $1,469. These adjustments are intended to bolster the financial stability of the EI systems, which provides crucial support to Canadians during periods of unemployment. Federal income tax adjustments have also been made, targeting high-income earners and corporations. The government has introduced higher tax rates for individuals earning more than $200,000 per year and increased taxes on large financial institutions and insurance companies. Now, these measures are part of a broader strategy to ensure that those who can afford to pay more contribute a fair share to the country's public finances.
It really is. For me, I think the takeaway is I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't go. I understood that they were going to have tax changes. I guess I hadn't anticipated that they would go in terms of the capital gains tax. I think any time that you change the tax treatment for individuals, farms, corporations.
A particularly contentious measure is the newly introduced Federal Impacts Levy, a 6% tax hike designed to cover the growing costs associated with refugee and asylum seeker support. This levy has sparked significant tension between the federal government and municipalities, especially in Toronto. City officials argue that the federal government needs to provide adequate funding to manage the influx of refugees and asylum seekers, forcing them to implement the levy to cover the shortfall. Toronto's budget chief has warned that without additional federal support, the city's going to have no choice but to increase taxes by a further 6% to address the escalating cost of sheltering refugees. This situation has led to a public spat between federal and local officials, highlighting the complex interplay between different levels of government in managing public funds and social responsibilities.
A revenue-generating measure included in this week's federal budget is drawing criticism from Canadian entrepreneurs and investors. The government is increasing the rate of the capital gains tax from 50% to 67%. It estimates the increase will generate...
One of the most pressing concerns surrounding Trudeau's tax policies is their impact on Canada's national debt. The country's debt has ballooned in recent years, partly due to extensive spending during the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite new taxes aimed at high-income individuals and corporations, experts warn that these measures will not suffice to reduce the national debt significantly. Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio soared to 118% in 2020, representing the highest increase among G7 nations. This precarious fiscal position leaves Canada vulnerable to future economic crises, potentially necessitating even more stringent tax measures or cuts to public services. Economists argue that while the new taxes will help fund essential social programs and green infrastructure projects, they don't address the underlying issue of the country's burgeoning debt. Without a clear plan to manage this debt, Canada risks facing severe fiscal constraints in the future.
It's going to be pretty bad. Spending is going to be up in all kinds of areas, but most especially in financing our debt. Our deficits have been growing year over year. That increases the national debt. And of course, with rising interest rates, we're now paying more.
Public reaction to Trudeau's tax increase have been mixed. Supporters argue that these measures are necessary to combat climate change, support social programs, and ensure a fairer distribution of wealth. They point to the importance of transitioning to a sustainable economy and investing in the future health and well-being of Canadians. However, opponents contend that the tax hikes are too burdensome, particularly for lower and middle-income families, and could stifle economic recovery and growth. The political ramifications of these policies are significant. Opposition parties, particularly the Conservatives, have seized on public discontent to criticize the Trudeau government. They argue that the tax increases are the result of fiscal mismanagement and will hurt Canada's economic competitiveness. The controversy surrounding the tax hikes has become a central issue in political discourse, influencing public opinion and electoral dynamics.
Meanwhile, 9 in 10 middle-class Canadians are paying more tax. Housing costs have doubled, so 76% of middle-class youth believe they'll never afford a home. 2 million people line up at a food bank because they can't afford to eat on a middle-class salary. Given that he already broke this exact same promise over 9 years.
Economists are divided on the long-term impact of Trudeau's tax policies. Proponents argue that higher taxes on carbon and income are necessary to fund essential social services and transition to a sustainable economy. They believe that the revenue generated from these taxes will support green infrastructure projects, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and provide rebates to offset increased living costs. Critics, however, caution that these measures could lead to economic stagnation and reduced investor confidence. They argue that the increased financial burdens on households and businesses could dampen consumer spending and investment, slowing economic growth. Additionally, the high level of national debt limits Canada's fiscal flexibility, making it more difficult to respond to future financial crises.
Payroll taxes, your total bill, if you're making $73,000 or more, will be about $5,100 in 2024. So more than $5,000 taken away from your paycheck, and your employer.
One of the primary justifications for the carbon tax is its role in addressing climate change. Canada, as a signatory to the Paris Climate Agreement, has committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to a net zero carbon economy by 2050. The carbon tax is designed to make polluting activities more expensive, thereby encouraging individuals and businesses to adopt cleaner technologies and practices. The revenue generated from the carbon tax is intended to fund green infrastructure projects, such as public transit, renewable energy, and energy-efficient buildings. These investments are crucial for reducing Canada's carbon footprint and meeting its climate targets. Additionally, the government has introduced various incentives and rebates to help households and businesses transition to cleaner alternatives.
The increase comes with a boost to the rebate that the government issues to help mitigate the cost. Ottawa plans to increase the levy each year until 2030. The program was established in 2019 to combat climate change. It does require provinces and territories to create their own levy on greenhouse gas emissions.
Another key aspect of the Prime Minister's tax policies is their focus on social equity and economic fairness. The government has introduced higher tax rates for high-income earners and large corporations, aiming to ensure that those who can afford to pay more contribute a fair share to public finances. This approach is intended to reduce corporate inequality and provide funding for essential social programs, such as healthcare, education, and social housing. The employment insurance tax increase is part of the broader strategy to strengthen social safety nets and provide support to Canadians during periods of unemployment. By increasing EI contributions, the government aims to ensure the long-term sustainability of the EI system and provide adequate benefits to those in need.
Price on pollution now stands at $80 a ton. However, the increase comes with a boost to the rebate that the government issues to help mitigate the cost. Ottawa plans to increase the levy each year until 2030.
Balancing fiscal responsibility with economic growth is a significant challenge for any government. Trudeau's tax policies reflect an attempt to address immediate budgetary needs, such as funding social programs and managing the national debt, while also investing in long-term economic and environmental goals. However, this balancing act is fraught with difficulties and risks. On one hand, the increased taxes provide much-needed revenue to support essential services and infrastructure projects. These investments are crucial for ensuring the well-being of Canadians and transitioning to a sustainable economy. On the other hand, the higher financial burden on households and businesses could stifle economic recovery and growth, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The program was established in 2019 to combat climate change. It does require provinces and territories to create their own levy on greenhouse gas emissions or adopt the federal system.
And federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre joins us live this afternoon with his reaction to the carbon tax increase. Mr. Poilievre, thanks so much for making time for CP24. We appreciate this.
Public opinion plays a crucial role in shaping economic policy and political leadership. The controversy surrounding Trudeau's tax increases highlights the importance of transparent and effective communication between the government and the public. By clearly articulating the rationale behind these measures and their intended benefits, the government can build public support and mitigate opposition. Political leadership is also essential in navigating complex economic challenges and balancing competing priorities. Effective leadership involves not only making difficult decisions, but also engaging with stakeholders, including businesses, communities, and advocacy groups, in order to build consensus and to address concerns.